The next section is on this of comparing the Nazi laws of Arizona to the Nuremberg Nazi laws. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, the Nazis in Germany in 1935 passed these series of laws. One was the prohibition of marriage between Germans and Jews. The second law was prohibiting sexual relations between Germans and Jews and defining what was a German. And then laws to punish anybody who violated that. And as these laws were being developed, things were getting worse and worse, and then that they had to wear a Star of David on their clothing to identify them on the street. And as this was happening, a lot of the Jews and Germans said, well, we're Germans. We're not foreigners here. We're just like all the other Germans. We just happen to be Jewish of religion. And everybody who's saying the Germans government is going to do horrible things to us, they don't know what they're talking about, because the Germans are a very civilized people. They would never do anything as horrible as what is being said, because Hitler had written a lot of this stuff in Mein Kampf. And obviously those Jews were dead wrong, because the Nazis basically killed the majority of the Jews, except for the few who escaped thoroughly. I was talking about how it took somebody like an Einstein to say, I'm getting out of here. This doesn't smell good at all. But what's going on in Arizona, you should be smelling the white supremacy, because this is not over. This is just, they're just warming up. And what we have to do is we have to get organized on our part. So what are the laws that are going on here in Nazi Arizona? The SB 1070, okay, they cut it a little bit, but you think that stopped them? If anything, they're trying to figure out how they can get other components of SB 1070. And the HB 2281, this whole ethnic studies law. And then you have the whole accents law. Again, who's that aimed at? Those people with the Canadian accents or the German accents? We know who that's aimed at. And then the fourth law is, or the law is a combination of SB 1308 and 1309, which is the so-called anchor babies law. And that has an unconstitutional component to it, but they don't care. They knew SB 1070 had unconstitutional components. It didn't stop them. If anything, it's given wind to other states to try to do something similar. They're trying to do something similar actually in Arizona, right? In California right now. So you also have this SB 1405, which is, again, this is against the UN, this is against international laws, this whole no illegals in hospitals. It's kind of, it's even illogical, it's unhealthy, a whole bunch of different things. It's just a crazy thing, but it's a crazy white supremacist law that they want passed. And I know some of these, they've kind of calmed them down or killed them, but it's not over, and they got plans for even a few more. SB 1225, which is going to make it a crime to have anybody undocumented in your car or in your homes. Does it sound Nazi now? Yeah. And that's why you have to know history. You have to know that what's going on now, it's not new. It's white supremacy. But even the Germans, they didn't come up with the idea, hey, let's do this thing to the Jews. They learned from the US, because remember in the 1930s, the military was segregated. You didn't have equality of being able to go to a hotel or a restaurant or education, all of this, including this state of Arizona and Texas and a few other places. So they learned from that, and they learned from apartheid in South Africa. And this is, again, the biggest weakness that we have as a people is that we're very ignorant of history. We're ignorant of our own history. We're ignorant of the history of the crimes that have been committed against us over the last 500 years. And that's something that we should have as a goal of changing. within the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the next 100 years. We got to change it, because if we don't, we're pretty much doomed. And for those who say, well, they wouldn't really do that to us, remember what the Jews thought. The Germans, they're so civilized, they wouldn't do anything like that to us. But it was done to them. And if you listen to some of these people right now, whether it's the teabaggers, or you're talking about Trump, or you're talking about, these are evil white supremacist people. They have no shame. They're coming out pretty naked about it. Now you got what we were talking about, how David Duke of the KKK is embraced by the teabaggers. So again, don't underestimate evil people. Whether they're evil white people, or guess where else there's some evil people? Amongst our own people. We have a lot of horrible white supremacists amongst our own people. We have a lot of evil people amongst ourselves that are very selfish in all of this. We have to be unselfish and think of our people. Obviously, if you're here in the room, you care, you want to do something, you want to think about how you can be more effective in this. And that's the guidance that we provide for you. Also, in this, who are the illegals? And we're saying, well, let's stop all this game playing. You know these laws are against us as Tezcatlipoca. They're not interested in the Canadian border. Those are just white people. It's not about borders. It's not about laws. It's about white supremacy. And explaining this whole thing, why we're not Hispanic and why we're not Latino, and why mestizo is not an identity. Nobody on this planet uses mestizo as an identity. Think about it. The French, they're a mix of what? Germanic tribes and Celtic tribes and other things. The Spaniards themselves of Moors and Germanic tribes, and the Romans, they don't call themselves mestizos. Same thing with the Italians or the Turks. People around the world, we're the only ones that get very obsessed with this mestizo concept, which always focuses on the Spanish language, European heritage, and that's basically the same thing what we're saying when we're saying raza. There's a guy who wrote a book called La Raza Cósmica, and that book it's all white supremacy. So when people use the word raza, it's derivative from that book. People who've never read the book, it's a white supremacist book in which we celebrate Dia de la Raza on October 12th, Columbus Day. So we are the only people on this planet who celebrate the rape of our people, the enslavement of our people, and we are happy about it, without knowing the full history of what's behind it. And the next one is, again, a couple of the posters, which we came up a couple of years back. We are indigenous, one people, one continent, no European borders. And if you look at the faces, they're split faces, and it's, again, showing some of our people from the so-called Canadian area, the so-called US area, so-called Mexico area, and showing that we are one people. And dealing with this whole idea, oh, well, that's one nation over here, that's one. Yeah, it's convenient to break us up into about 500 nations. That's not in our interest, it's in the interest of colonialism. And we got to just knock off all this crap about, oh, those are English speakers, those are Spanish speakers, those are, oh, they're not part of my people, they're not part of my tribe, they're not part of oh, I'm Purepecha, oh, I'm Zapoteco, I got nothing to do with those Salvadorians, I got nothing to. We got all these divisions amongst our people. And is that helping us? Is that serving our interests? It's helping white supremacy. And again, when we're asserting our identity as Tezcatlipoca, the question comes up, what is your tribe, if you are? What kind of Indian are you? Well, first of all, we're not Indians. The Indians are the people of India. And that's something Europeans have been able to get that straight for the last 500 years. There is a country called India, and this ain't it. Yeah. But when they ask us this question, it's a tough way to respond, because they assume that we were all living in teepees, we were all scattered all over the place. But the reality is the majority of our people, about 90% of our people, were living in cities and large towns, and only about 10% of our people were living in tribal areas. And the biggest tribal area was obviously in the northern part here. But even those areas, there were large towns actually along the Mississippi that were obviously connected further south. So that's this whole question. And so some of our people, they'll say, well, I'm an Aztec. And that's what we've been taught to say, because we know the Aztec calendar, we know there's Nahuatl, we know, but then most of us actually have been disconnected from whatever urban civilizations we were a part of, or even what tribal areas we were a part of, or in my case, I'm a mix of tribal areas and the Purepecha. And so you have a little bit of confusion when it comes to all of this, of what's been happening to us over the last 500 years. It's just like this whole thing with this African guy confronting and saying, well, what tribe are you? And I say, well, you're an African. What tribe are you from? They can't answer. Well, the majority of our people can't answer either. Because even if we weren't mixed with the Europeans, they mix us up with the urban, with another urban city, urban with a tribal area, move some of us south, move us north, in addition to using smallpox to wipe out our major cities. That's how they were able to kill so many of us, because we were concentrated in the cities.